Hi, everyone. We're live. I'm Debbie Schwartz, and I'm here with Russ Vitale, and we're so excited. Drum roll. Day one of the Build Your Perfect College List Challenge. And we're just going to chat for just a few minutes to give people the chance to come on. We have a little housekeeping to talk about, and I'm actually getting a few messages, so I might need to just go away for a second, but we just wanted to say hi. And let me introduce myself quickly, then I'm going to move it over to Russ to introduce himself, and then we're going to start to get moving. So I'm Debbie Schwartz. A lot of you hopefully know me from the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. I also we have a Facebook page called Road to College and a website called Road to College. And I've been doing this for a few years, and when I say doing this, it's been trying to share good information with families about college admissions and paying for college. My background is actually in financial services, and I've been through this process twice so far because I have 3 kids, and as you'll hear from both Russ and myself, we both have a junior in high school. So we are going through this step by step with you this year. I've just I love getting to know the people in this community, in this space. And I've also really tried to provide good services and to try and really streamline and simplify this process at much, much, much more reasonable prices than what you might get in other areas. So that's always been my goal. This is, what we're doing tonight fits in perfectly with, that objective. And I think over the next 5 nights, you'll get a ton of information that will really jumpstart you on the path towards building the college list, and just in general, this whole path towards the college admissions process in 11th grade and on. And I know that there are people here who have kids in 10th grade, and this is fabulous for you. So I'm going to pass this to Russ. I did see one message from somebody who's having trouble getting the stream, so I just want to help them. And then I'll be here, but Russ is going to introduce.
Okay. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Russ Vitale, and I've been an independent college counselor, advisor, coach for going into my 16th season now. So I guess the equivalent of 16 years. I work with families all over the country, even outside the country as well. Students who are looking to go to American colleges. They're in foreign countries attending American high schools and want to come back to the States for college. So I have a lot of experience, obviously, as a result of this. It's my passion. Before this, I had 13 years at a major Fortune 100 company. Decided that I saw an opportunity here to help others, and in a very complicated and sometimes overwhelming process. So I got into this, like I said, about 16 seasons ago, and I love it. It's my passion. I actually am a best-selling author as well. Last year came out, actually in 2018, end of 2018, came out with a book called College, Making the Complicated Easy. And that's what we're going to try to do for you over the next 5 days as well. I know it can be, again, overwhelming and a little bit complicated at times and frustrating. But if you break it down the way we're going to do it over these next couple of evenings as a good starting point to get the foundation ready, I think you can really start, absorbing it in smaller chunks and feeling much more comfortable and confident, have peace of mind going forward. And that's what we're trying to do today. So, from my personal practice perspective, my company is called Destination College. My website is destinationcollegesuccess.com. And I am kind of well versed in every aspect of the college planning process: financial aid counseling, athletic recruiting, essays, applications, interviews, class choices, how to do college visits, the whole thing. I've been doing all that for, like I said, for 16 years. So I do know a lot of stuff. I can't promise you know everything. And whatever I don't know, I'll definitely do research for all of you on. But we have a really good, I think great, robust package for you over the next couple of days to get you rolling and get you to address some of the key factors to starting to put and build the perfect college list for you and your family.
Okay, So I'm back. I just want to give people a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. And the most important piece right now for the Facebook Live is I put a link in the group to ask people to give StreamYard, which is the streaming platform that we use, permission to show your Facebook profile page and your name. This is out of my hands. This is a Facebook policy thing. Quirky. I don't know why they do it. They do it specifically if we're doing Facebook Lives within groups. But I just think, you can post questions, you can comment. If you don't want to give permission, we just won't see your face or your name. So we can answer your question. It's just nice to see who you are. So let me put this, I'm going to show it right now. For some reason, I'm having trouble, to tell you the truth, posting in the comments. But I'm going to ask Mindy, who is helping us behind the scenes. Mindy, if you can post that in the comments. Oh, she did. Thank you, Mindy. That's helpful. So again, looks like most people have done that, but please go ahead. It just click. And I think once you click, it just says, I give permission, and that's the end. And that's all you're doing is just giving permission for this group that we can see your face and your name.
Great.
Okay. And other little bit of housekeeping is I will tell you the #1 question I got, which is fine. And it's nothing to do with paying for college, nothing to do with building the college list. The #1 question was, is this being recorded and can I watch it later? And the answer is yes. All of these Facebook Lives are recorded. I will show you in an email or a little later, but in the sidebar of the Facebook group is a little tab that says videos, and all of these Facebook Lives live there. So you want to come back and watch them, you missed a night, you want to show it to your partner or your child, you can just pull it up there and watch them at any time.
Right. Cool.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. The last thing of housekeeping. I sent out a few emails, and I apologize. You might think I'm repetitive, but you wouldn't believe that a lot of people kind of miss some of these emails, and so that's why we might send them 2 or 3 times just to make sure that you really, see that we're going live or that you see the homework and that type of stuff. So there was an email that was sent earlier today for people who signed up probably after 7:45 tonight. You'll get the email later on. And the email had an attachment of a homework, which we'll also give here. But what I'm saying is just kind of be on the lookout for emails from me, Debbie, at Road to College. If for whatever reason you did not get an email, but I'm assuming most people did because you're in this group, so you got the link to the group. Please check your spam, because that sometimes happens, or send me a message if you're not getting the emails, because we want to make sure you are.
Yeah, it's very important to check those emails, especially now that we're starting and over the next couple of days, because there will be information to follow up on these calls, and also give you information as to what we're doing the next night, and so on. So it's really important to check those emails out as best you can.
Okay, so we're going to get started, and we're going to be sharing a presentation. Oh, sorry. One last thing, guys, about questions. Feel free to put questions in the comments. If the question kind of, is appropriate and connects with what we're talking about at the moment, we'll probably stop before we go to the next slide and try and answer the question. If it's kind of, not related specifically to what we're talking about tonight, we might hold it. And my guess is it will probably fit into another topic, another night. But we're going to try and get to most of them, but we probably won't get to absolutely every single one tonight, but we'll try our best. And I don't know, Russ, if you want to add anything for that.
Well, the only other thing I was going to say is, what we want to do, aside from tonight, because we're doing some logistics first, but we really want to try to keep this to no more than 45 minutes in respect of everybody's time, because if it goes on too much more than that, people start getting bored or maybe not being quite as attentive. So and this is a little bit future 10 minutes right now just doing the logistics stuff and introduction and all that. But after that, hopefully we're going to just kind of get into stuff and, hopefully keep it as best we can to 45 minutes. So in the interest of time, sometimes too, we may not get to every single question.
Okay, let me share. Okay, Russ, right? Okay, so we're still here, and you get to see the presentation as we go through it.
Yeah, it's better than looking at us anyway, right? Well, at least me, that's for sure.
Okay, these are our intro.
Yep. Picture of the book, little shameless plug.
Oops, sorry. Okay.
Okay, so tonight what we're really looking to do is, obviously we just kind of did the welcome, but we're looking to give you some of the challenge guidelines and logistics, which Debbie will discuss in a second, but also how to start identifying your financial factors, because obviously with the paying for college 101, that's the whole key, right? But as a lot of you probably know, there's a lot of other things other than finance, but college is expensive. And I know that sounds really obvious, but it's one of the biggest expenses you may have in your lifetime, other than a house, a business, maybe a very fancy car. I don't know. But so what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to address the financial factors first to help give you a foundation and understanding of how it might work, and also give you then some homework on how to find schools that are in your budget.
So, and then let me just comment about the homework. Maybe that's even like a dirty word. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed. It's to give you a little practice in what we're talking about. So we're trying to kind of hit all your senses. You hear us, you can read us, you'll read our emails. And if you do a little bit of the homework, you'll actually be, acting on the stuff that we recommend. So that's the purpose of the homework. It's not meant to be overwhelming. It really shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. If you do it and then you have questions, great, come back. Share with us what your results are, and obviously ask any questions.
Good.
Oh, okay. This was just a fun slide. I'm not sure we have much else to say about the challenge right now.
Okay, so a lot of you might, when I talk to people, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed, a little confused, because you hear a lot of things, right? So already, even before we started, there were a couple of questions in the pop-up group, people asking about, as an example, how merit works at different schools, from a financial perspective. And, the financial aspect also, a lot of times, people don't understand how it works, but they also don't understand if they're going to qualify, and they don't understand what certain terms mean. So hopefully today you're going to feel a whole lot better about that after this the 45 minutes that we spend here. So well, hopefully you won't feel like that for too long. So all right, so just real quick recap. Today we're going to do the financial fit factors, day 2 academic, which is more than, by the way, just getting in and/or majors and careers. We're going to talk about non-academic and non-financial factors, which to me, not enough people spend enough time talking about. It's really key, really important. As a matter of fact, I just met with a former student of mine yesterday, who is a freshman in college and having some transition challenges. And a lot of my kids, I can't tell you how many of them that I work with, because I have a great relationship with them, trust and all that, come back to me and kind of talk through that stuff. And it's mostly the non-academic factors that play a major part in that transition. We're going to talk about the data. There's so much data out there, but we're going to talk to you about which we recommend and how to get the most up-to-date information. And then more importantly, how to apply that data to what it is, goals that you and your family are looking for. And then day 5, which is the key day, we're going to put everything together and really show you how to, use all the things that you've learned. And then again, getting back to the homework, that's what it's for. It's not to overwhelm you, as we said. It's to actually you practical experience of actually putting to work things we're talking about here and the suggestions we're making, so you understand how to do it in the future. So yeah, that's what we want you afterwards. We want to be like, yeah, I got this, right? So hopefully that'll be the case for all of you. So, okay. So let's get into the financial fit factors. So if you want, Deb. So this is kind of a slide that I use in a lot of presentations I do, and hopefully you can read that, but there's my net worth. Do you mean after taxes or after I pay for your education, right? And haha, yes, unless it's your money, right? So I use this all the time because, you know, again, the financial investment for college is going to be significant almost no matter where your child goes. But to be efficient in time, effort, and money as you go through the process is the goal that I try to do with my clients and have with my clients. But it's also the goal that we're going to try to teach you in this initial thing, at least how to start along that line. So we're going to try to teach you college is expensive. I don't need to tell you that. We want to hopefully have you have options, financial options, as you go through this whole process for you, your student, and your family.
And can I just add one thing, Russ?
Sure.
And this actually came up in the Paying for College 101 group in the past week, and you'll probably see more and more of kind of these posts. You know, we're going to kind of talk about the financial aspect, how you figure out how much you're willing to pay for college, how much college costs. And then, you know, we would strongly recommend that you have a conversation with your child, you know, that you're honest about the information you're going to pull together, so that and this is the perfect timing so that there's no surprises, because you'll see a lot of stories of families not having that conversation. The admissions decisions come in. Maybe they've got some great, you know, acceptances, and then they have to face the hard truth of they might not be able to afford that. And that's just, you know, a disappointing conversation to have at that point of the process when you could have had it probably a year and a half earlier, and maybe actually made different choices for this college list, you know, if you'd had that discussion.
Absolutely. And that's where we talk about the reason why we picked this as the challenge topic, and we did it last year too, to great success. And you know, people are asking for it again, but the reason we did this is because I use with my clients too that the list drives everything. Most people put a college list together. They watch the NCAA basketball tournament and they think, oh, that looks like a cool place. You know, their uncle tells them they should apply here or go there. They see something on TV, whatever. A lot of people do it more on the emotional aspect and the, you know, cool factor, rather than really understanding how to vet out a college and make sure it's a good match for them. And the list is going to drive affordability, admissibility, process, timing, work effort, everything that you need to do between now and when your child applies. So that's why the factors that we're trying to introduce you today to start you with are really so key. So you have a realistic college list given the admission goals and financial goals that you have for you, your family, and your student. So we just gave some keys here, and actually, if you have the homework, you saw there's a bunch of questions at the bottom. But you know, do you know what colleges cost? Do you know what your budget is? You know, it's amazing that a lot of people actually don't have a budget and don't really know their expenses. Never mind college. Sometimes they don't even know how much money they make versus what goes out, and it's a little scary to me. And you don't have to necessarily watch every dollar, but you should be aware of those kind of things, because you know there are things that the college might offer you. There's things that you're going to have to do outside of that, and there's also, you know, internal budget and cash flow things that you might need to do. Do you know your EFC, and do you even know what that means? We're going to talk about that today. Loans, a lot of people, I can't tell you how many families say to me, well, we already had the financial conversation with our student, and he knows that if it's anything over this amount, he's going to have to take out loans. I'd say, great, but unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So, especially not in today's loan market. So, loans and understanding what those are, and we'll talk about a little bit about that later. And then also, as Debbie said, having that financial conversation. And by the way, you know, most kids know that it's not a blank check for everything, whether it be a car, going to the restaurant, or whatever. I always tell my students too, you know, it's not just on mom and dad to be able to afford this stuff. You know, if you want to go to XYZ school and help out, be the best academic student that you can possibly be. Do as well and put the effort in for the ACT, SAT, the standardized tests and all that to qualify for money that might actually help make it more affordable for mom and dad. So it's not just on mom and dad. You as a student, this is your job right now. So you have to do your part as well. So I think that should be part of the conversation too. And please understand, I'm not trying to tell anybody how to parent their child, but I do that with my own students when I interact with them and when people hire me. But I also do it with my own daughter, who, as we said, is a junior. So we thought what we would start with is an introduction on how financial aid actually works. So Deb, you can go right to the next slide if you like. So bottom line is, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this thing called EFC, Expected Family Contribution. And the expected family contribution basically comes as a result of you and your family submitting at least 2 forms. One is called the FAFSA, which a lot of you probably have heard about that, okay? But that's used for federal aid. Every school in the country takes the FAFSA, okay? It includes resources of parent or parents and student. For those of you who are married, obviously. If you happen to be divorced, it'll be you and also whoever your other ex is will have to file most likely what they call a non-custodial form of some sort. But also, if you are divorced and remarried, you have to understand that you and your new husband or new wife's income is and assets are all put together, even though it's not their child. And I can't tell you how many times that comes into play with people, and it sometimes builds some contention. But it's a universal application that you fill out once. It goes to every one of the schools. And really, when it says it's without special considerations, meaning it doesn't take into account cost of living based on where you live. It doesn't take into account necessarily an explanation of the fact that you had options at your job that came due and you had to take them. It doesn't account for things of a one-time inheritance or any of those type of things. So it's really kind of brass tacks, and it gets down to its income, assets, and it's a formula, and it just kind of dry. It just works.
And unfortunately, it doesn't take into account debts too.
Correct. And then there's also something else. So that's the FAFSA, which is they use the federal methodology. And then there's this thing called the institutional methodology. And that's for institutional or college-specific aid. And the way colleges give aid is very different depending on the college. So this is the first time we'll address the question that was, in a degree, the question that came up in the pop-up group. That would also be an example of not so much about the forms, but the way an institution addresses aid would definitely include merit. May or may not, which is another thing we'll talk about later, but merit would be in the way institutions also provide aid. It's, a little bit more intrusive, the form, and a little bit more work to do. It is called the CSS profile, which is on College Board. You could go to College Board under paying tab, and you could take a look at this form if you want to take a look at it and get a preview. And also a big thing that people ask us about this all the time is, when do we fill this out? It's going to be October. It comes out officially October 1st of your child's senior year. You want to try to fill it out. I always tell people you want to try to get it done as soon as possible, no later than Thanksgiving, but actually earlier if you can, just because you want to get in line for the monies while they're available and not fight for scraps.
Russ, maybe you also want to mention what tax year these forms are based on? Yeah,
so my understanding, and Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong with this because I've heard different things, but my understanding is that for like this class of 2020, it was the 2018 taxes that were utilized for that, correct?
Correct. So, right. So it's 2 years prior to the year your child is starting school.
Right. So
for a lot of us who are, 2000, our kids are going to start school in 2021, right? Yes,
yep.
Fall of 2021. So it's going to be, these forms are going to use the taxes from 2019.
Which we're all in the process of scurrying to file now. All right. That is a good point.
So, let me just make one other point, and then Claudine has a good, quick question.
Okay.
The other question that always comes up a lot is, do I have to fill out these forms? Like,
oh. Yeah, I mean, do you want me to address that?
Go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to just tell you, sometimes I work with families and clients of all different, obviously, economic levels, academic levels, and the like. A lot of people tell me, we're not going to qualify for aid, so we don't need to talk about that. I still have the conversation with my clients, and I'm going to just tell you that, in my opinion, you have to file the financial aid form. Have to. There's a lot of reasons for that. The biggest reason is that a lot of schools will not give even merit money eligibility to your for your student unless you go through the process and file the form. And it doesn't matter. Last year, I had a client who made $5 million. That was a year. That was their AGI. Like, why am I bothering with this, Russ? I mean, my EFC is like ridiculous. I said, just do it, please, anyway. 4 of the 7 schools that the student got into, he got a minimum of $10,000 a year in merit scholarship. So it doesn't matter. If a guy who makes $5 million can get merit money, so could you. But in my personal opinion, you have to file the forms, because the other thing, just from a financial responsibility perspective, I was briefly in financial services myself for a little bit before I started this business. And I always told people, planning financially is about opening up what I call pockets of money. And the way you open up pockets of money relative to college is, in addition to whatever you have in savings, 529, cash flow, all those kind of things, you also at least become eligible for whatever FAFSA and the CSS profile will make you eligible for. In the worst case scenario, you can always turn it down and not use it if you want to. The bottom line is, you don't fill out the forms, you don't qualify to open up those other pockets.
Okay, I'm going to show a few quick questions. So Claudine's asking, does FAFSA consider when you have more than one child in college at a time?
It does. So it'll ask you very specifically how many kids are going to be in college in the upcoming year, and the EFC, which we're going to talk about in a second. But your EFC, if you have multiple kids, if you have 2 kids in, it actually gets divided by 2, and it gets applied, half of that gets applied to each child.
Are both forms released on October 1st?
They are. October 1st, yes.
Right. So you cannot, if you want to go look at a FAFSA now, you can, but you should not be entering in until October 1st.
Exactly. And the other thing too, I'll just tell you, some people get a little like antsy about the financial stuff and the paperwork. I have to tell you, if you have your tax return in front of you and you're familiar with your financial position, meaning your assets, you don't have to know really specific details, but how things work. But if you at least have your balance statements with you, FAFSA specifically is really not a heavy lifting thing to fill out. So don't any of you parents stress out about that. In my opinion, it's not something that's, and you, in my opinion, you also shouldn't be paying somebody to help you do that. It's not a tough form. CSS profile is a little bit more intrusive, like I said, and a little bit deeper. Even that, it's not a heavy lifting thing, in my opinion, to fill out. Pain, but you can do it.
Just to restate, because I see there's a lot of questions about this, would you please state again the tax years used? So the simple way to think about it is you take the year that your child's starting school, the fall that they're starting. So for those of us with juniors, they're going to be starting school in 2021, and then you subtract 2 years. So it's 2 years prior to the year that they start school.
Right.
Okay. One other question. So I thought CSS was for certain private schools. Is that correct?
Yes. So as I stated before, the FAFSA is for every single school in the country for federal aid. CSS profile, I probably wasn't specific with this, but this is for about, last I saw, about 355, 360 private schools in the country that use that form, correct?
And one other good question. Do I have to fill this out every year?
Yes. Yes, if you want to continue to have loan access, sometimes work study, and those stuff, you would need to fill it out every year, yes.
So you do need to fill the FAFSA out every year. It depends by school. Some schools let you fill out the CSS profile once, right. but so that might depend on the school. But the FAFSA you have to fill out every year.
Every year, but also in addition, like these are the 2 main forms that a lot of people talk about. There are also individual. I mean, it can get a little complicated. There are also individual forms that some colleges have as well that we couldn't possibly talk about in detail. Sometimes this is not all you have to do. There might be an institutional specific form. Like I said before, there could be a non-custodial form for families who are divorced and the other parent who's not filing the FAFSA. So there could be some other stuff. We're just trying to hit on the 2 big ones that generate majority of this EFC thing, which we're going to talk about next.
Okay.
So yeah, I love the Little Rascals. I used to love watching them. Now, I saw that same picture when you have a daughter. That's apparently what happens.
Right.
Anyway, okay. So EFC. So what is EFC? EFC is expected family contribution. Okay. So based on your income and your assets that you fill out on this FAFSA. And by the way, I'm going to tell you about this. This is something I talk about all the time with my clients. Your income, no matter what anybody else says, is the number one driver of your EFC. Now, again, Debbie said that she was in financial services. I was briefly for a little bit too. I can't tell you how many financial people try to talk to potential clients, and have them a little worried or fearful. They have too much money in either cash or mutual funds or whatever, and they try to kind of sometimes sell them products that are supposedly hidden from the FAFSA and from the CSS profile. I'm telling you, be very, very skeptical of that. I always tell people, you never, ever, ever do something financially from a financial planning perspective with hopes that it's going to help you in college. It's got to be a good thing for your financial plan, for your future goals outside of college. If there's also a potential college benefit, then you might think about it. By the way, before you do it, as we're going to talk about EFC calculators and all that kind of stuff, you can do the change numbers online somewhere just to see what the potential difference is before you commit to anything financially, before you sign any paperwork, before you do any of that. So I just want to throw that out there, not to make anybody paranoid, but I undo a whole bunch of those every year before, because people are skeptical and they should be. So it's the income is the number one driver. Okay, and then you submit these the FAFSA to every school, CSS profile to the private school, provided that they require it. And by the way, that's another thing you can do, and we are going to talk about data later. Everybody hopefully is familiar with College Board. It's collegeboard.org. When you go there, it's a free website. It's usually related to the SAT, PSAT, and all that kind of stuff. But you can go there for free. You can put the college name in the search bar. When you hit up, the individual college will come up. And on the left-hand side, there's a tab called Paying. You can click on Paying, and then another set of 5 tabs will come, or 4 tabs will be up top. And you say, how to apply for financial aid. If you click that tab, it'll tell you specifically what forms that college requires to apply for financial aid. FAFSA, CSS profile, school's own form, non-custodial form, business form, whatever, all those kind of things. So that's just a little tip that maybe some of you don't know. So if you're curious about the schools you're interested in, what they look for, what's required, you can find a quick little cheat sheet there. Other key factor is the last point. I cannot emphasize this more. We're going to show the example in the next slide, but your expected family contribution is not necessarily the only amount you're going to be responsible for your child's education. Okay, I'm going to explain that in a second. But the bottom line is you cannot go through the process, any of the EFC calculators or any of those kind of things, and say, okay, my EFC is $25,000. So if I apply to school at 70, college has to give me the rest of the money. That's not how it works.
Okay. One good quick question. So every year the school decides what your financial aid package is?
Yes, they will. Now, the only thing that's an exception to that would be probably a couple things. One is if your child gets merit money, that typically is annually renewable with no issues, no challenges, no qualms, provided that your student meet the minimum GPA or academic requirement, if there is one, which a lot of them do. You have to have a 3.0 to continue to get the X number of dollars per year. The other thing is, relative to this, as long as you follow the form, your Stafford loan is going to be kind of a standard thing that you'll qualify for regardless. So that's not going to be recalculated, reconsidered. Your need may be, which could change your financial package going forward to some degree, yes.
Okay, I'm going to share this question, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to have this feeling. So Eve is saying, I've done a sample EFC calculation and it seems very high for what I can afford. Is that typical?
It is. Most people, again, I would say with the clients I work with, probably only about 30% of my clients actually have this discussion, despite me always offering it, but I don't push. And when I do that, I always tell them that they may want to bring a bottle of wine with them for the conversation, because when they see the number, they go, oh, this is for 4 years, right? I go, no. It's for 1 year. So again, it doesn't take into account, like Debbie said, your debt doesn't take into account your cost of living, and depending where you live in the United States or wherever else, it doesn't account for. It's kind of an antiquated, archaic kind of number, in my opinion, and it's everybody's treated the same way regardless. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people when they see the number, they go, why should I even bother? But unfortunatetly, that is very difficult.
I'm going to pass on this explanation that was once given to me by somebody who works in financial aid. I'm not saying I agree with it, but this is kind of like the philosophy behind, why the FAFSA calculation is the way it is. So the government's philosophy is that that number kind of represents that a third of that number can come from savings, that you should have some savings. So they're figuring that, whatever your EFC, a third of that number can come from savings. A third of that number can come from your current income that you're willing, I'm not saying we can afford it, but that you can somehow, use your current income to pay for college. And a third of that number, they are assuming will come from loans.
Yeah.
It will come from federal loans. That's why they, give out the student loans. Again, I am not saying I agree, but that is the philosophy, and that's why it seems overwhelming.
Yeah, no, I think the number is in most instances, people look at the number and kind of like get guided a little bit by the number. So we gave a very easy, simple example. It's very important to cover this. So let's just assume for fun, the college that your child is thinking about has a total cost of attendance of $40,000 a year. Now that includes everything: room and board, tuition, books, travel, whatever. Okay. Your EFC, based on you putting in all the numbers that you need to in the FAFSA and it's spitting out, it says that you have an expected family contribution based on your income and your assets of $20,000. That means that technically you have need, right? So it's 40,000 minus 20,000. You have need and qualified for need of $20,000. But the issue comes that not every school meets 100% of need. It could be anywhere from 100% met, 0% met. In addition, even if they meet 100% of that need, 50% be in free money, what they call gift aid, which is merit and those kind of grants and those kind of things. The other 50% would be in what they call self-help, which basically means that you have to take out a loan or find the money in your own budget, assets, 529s, whatever else you have. So it's very likely if you have an EFC of 20,000, that a good portion of that need is going to come back to you and you're going to be responsible for it if you want your child to attend. And that's what is so important. So it's really important that you understand that need does not mean somebody needs to give you that money. It depends on how the colleges address that need. And then even when they address that, do they give more loans or do they give more gift aid, which is what everybody obviously wants?
And what Russ just said is the crux of a lot of good research that you're going to have to do. For every school that you put on your child's list and they decide to apply to, you should, and we'll show you along the way, you should know these numbers for those schools.
Definitely. Okay, so let's talk about a couple financial aid facts, maybe rumors, myths, misnomers, whatever you want to call it. So we're liking the baby thing today. So because the college list, like we said, drives financial aid. Okay, the types of schools that your student applies to drives public versus private, elite, selective, competitive, and more mainstream schools. The type of student that your student is compared to the schools they apply to. There's a lot, whether or not they have honors programs. There's a whole lot of things that go into financial aid process above and beyond this EFC, which is kind of the first thing. But we're here to talk about predominantly the more traditional thing, just to get your feet wet and start to get you to think about these things. So as I said before, in spite of what many of you have heard or maybe will hear at a financial aid night, many of you will qualify for financial aid even though you think you earn too much money. I just gave that example of my client who made $5 million a year last year and still got over $10,000 at like 4 of the schools that his son got into. So you definitely need to file the forms, but you also, the better educated you are on the process, the more likely you can qualify for at least some type of money and aid.
So Russ, here's a good question.
Sure.
Is income that's used for these forms based on total gross income?
It's your adjusted gross income on your tax return from your federal tax return. So that's what they're going to take is your adjusted gross income for that 2019 year if you're a 2021 candidate.
Okay, good question. Are the extras, and maybe we should mention what the extras are the extras in the cost of attendance number usually correct?
Well, so it's going to depend. Usually what ends up happening is after your child actually gets accepted to certain schools, at some point in the process, they're going to get financial aid award letters. And that financial aid award letter from each of the schools that your child's accepted to are going to break out the cost of attendance as well as what you qualified for and all those type of things. And a lot of times I've seen that tuition is very specific, room and board is usually pretty specific. Then they usually have estimates for things like books and travel and some other things. So, they could estimate, $1,500 a year for travel, but the school is, a half-hour ride from your house. Obviously that wouldn't apply to you. So I think for the most part, the extras are fairly accurate. They're probably most likely going to be averages. They're not going to be dollar for dollar. Colleges compete for students, but the student has to be a good match for the school. So I'll give you another example. I said before, I work with all kinds of students. I work with very elite students that want to attend Ivy Leagues and sub-Ivy League schools. And I work with students who have a 2.7 GPA and just want to find a good match, which I think is just as important, sometimes even more important in my opinion. But the better your child is a match for a given school, the more potential there's going to be for them to get free money, the merit money based on their academic standing. But it's also important to understand and know a lot of the higher end, more selective schools, despite the great student that your student may be, academically, GPA and ACT, SAT wise, they may not give merit money. They may be completely 100% need based. Many of the upper, more selective schools are need based only. So a lot of clients will come to me and say, I know we didn't want to talk about the financial stuff with you, Russ, but we're kind of surprised. He has a 35 on his ACT. He has a 4.7 GPA on a 5-point scale, and he didn't get any money at, BC. Like, yeah, he didn't get any money because they don't do that there.
And not saying anything, but they shouldn't have been surprised, which you should not be surprised because you'll have done your research ahead of time.
That's why we have this conversation, and that's why I try to have it with everybody, but some people don't like to have it. Right. So colleges have empty seats to fill. It's called yield, and it's I'm not a big, you'll find out as we go through this process, I'm not a big believer of ratings and rankings. I think they're kind of a waste of time, to be honest with you. But yield is a big deal because it does drive the rating and ranking of the colleges. So yield basically means the people that actually, they offered admission to 10,000 kids and 10,000 kids actually accepted are going to attend. You don't want to have 9,900 and leave 100 seats open because that's big money to the college. So they will compete, provided that, again, your student is in the right arena to be able to compete for those seats. So, and just kind of, this is just a little bit like they want. So a lot of people will say, okay, if my child gets a scholarship at one school, can I use that as leverage for another school? And the answer is sometime. Okay, you might be able to do that, but it has to be a like for the most part comparison. I like to have people compare offers within the same state. A lot of in-state rivalry, in-state public school versus private school. But if they're seen on a much different academic level, in their opinion, then it's going to be very difficult to have colleges compete. But if you have like schools and like offers, you at least have some leverage to be able to go in after the fact and maybe negotiate some things and hopefully get some more monies down the road.
So, and I'm curious, Russ, do people sometimes have a school on their child's list to maybe play that role of?
I actually always do that. Yes, it's part of the strategy that I usually try to employ with my students and with my families. I usually want to make sure that we have at least a couple schools that I feel we could leverage against one another for sure. Now, sometimes people will say, well, I don't, why are we applying to that school? He's not really interested. And I'll tell them what the purpose is. And sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. But it's usually in that instance. And by the way, it's not that it's a bad school. It's just for whatever reason, they may not be interested. But I always recommend some schools when I help my clients put a college list together, have at least one or two schools that would serve that purpose, give us a little bit of leverage. Yes. That's where the strategy comes in, right?
Yep.
The homework. Do you want to talk about the homework, Deb?
Sorry, I went. Yes, hold on.
We're not yet. We're not saying goodbye yet.
Yeah.
We're wrapping it up.
Actually, I'm going to call on Mindy again. Mindy's going to put a file in the comments that you can access. It's a PDF. We'll also put it in the group. You also will receive it if you haven't already received it in an email. So again, we're trying to get you from all angles. And the worksheet / homework is really to get you to start to think about, what your college budget is. So, whether you want to do this kind of without your child at first, which is fine, but, kind of start pulling your numbers together. If you've been lucky enough to be able to put aside money that's specific for college, what is that dollar amount now? Do you think you could possibly use anything from your current income that, you could pay towards college? What could that be? Do you have any relatives that might be helping you out? So pull together all your sources, and we kind of list what those sources might be, and, see what that number is. It's a starting point. So at least you know what your capacity possibly is for paying.
Yeah, and if I could, Deb, a couple of things. First off, I agree. I would not do this with my student at all. When I have my initial financial aid consultation meeting with my clients, I definitely say, we as adults that have this conversation, child not included, because a kid most likely is not going to get it, but also depending on the financial, you don't necessarily always, as parents, want your kids knowing all your financial details anyway, and they're obviously not going to understand it. And depending on what your financial situation is versus what your affordability and all that kind of stuff, it can kind of put them in a little bit of a panic if you have a kid that is actually conscious of those kind of things. In today's world, not many are, but I know some are. So to me, I think it's more for the parents. And then the other thing too is, this is kind of a little bit like the ripping the Band-Aid off kind of thing. A lot of people don't want to do this because it could be a little painful. Even if you have the money, it could be a little painful to realize how much of it's going to go somewhere else, for this college. And is it really worth it? And is there a return on investment, which we're going to talk about over the next couple of nights? So that's really a subjective thing, but we'll talk about the factors you need to think about to try to assess that point. But this is really important, and some of the stuff, as kind of ripping the Band-Aid off feel that it's going to give of doing the homework, but it's not highly sophisticated either. I think it's a nice balance of just basics, get you to think about this and have a conversation, whether you're a single parent or with, as Debbie said, your partner, your spouse, whoever, and just start having a conversation about it so you understand what you're getting into. I always say that this is no different. College is no different than buying a house, a business, or a car. You want to understand and have financial conversations amongst yourself, also with the institutions, so you understand what to expect. Okay, and that's going to be something when we talk about the homework tomorrow. We'll get in a little more detail of it, not at this moment. The first step is understand how financial aid works, understand what your EFC, expected family contribution, is most likely going to be, and then look at some schools like I had suggested and try to understand what % of your need might be met by those schools. It's really important because, again, you don't want to be in the Maserati dealership if you should be in a Kia dealership. Okay. And by the way, Kias are a great, dependable, reliable cars, very sporty looking. You know, I don't think most people care. Maybe some people do. But at the end of the day, it's still going to get you from point A to point B just fine. Okay. So I feel the same way about college. Definitely some elite, high-end schools that people on pedestal for whatever reason. But there's a million, there's literally 2,500 great schools out there that really we can help you find, as long as you don't follow what we call bumper sticker Emmy, which is nothing we're going to talk about.
So the homework includes pulling together your own college budget. As Russ said, go and we give you the link to start to get an idea of what your EFC is going to be. And then just pull up, go to the websites of 3 colleges and find out what their total cost of attendance is. So you start to see, what all these numbers are. I always like to include your state school, your flagship state school, because that's like a good point of reference.
Definitely.
If there's a private school that, your student might be interested in, and maybe another out-of-state school. I mean, just try and get 3 kind of different category of schools to see what those costs are, and they're going to vary.
Right. And by the way, to that end, not at the moment, this exercise is really a financial exercise, okay? Not at the moment worry about your child's ability to get admitted. Okay, not with this part of the exercise. With this part of the exercise, if you're a big Notre Dame fan for whatever reason, like Notre Dame on the list and just see how they address financial aid. It's more the learning of how financial aid works at this point. Now, again, hopefully you have some schools in mind, but if you have really no understanding where you are with that yet, you haven't really discussed it, and especially for those of you who may have a freshman or a sophomore, you may say, I don't even know. I mean, she doesn't know. No problem. 3 schools, like Debbie said, usually your flagship public school, that would be your, now, by the way, you're going to find out it's really going to be hard to beat that number from a financial perspective, right? Because that's why you pay taxes, right? So you're supposed to get a little bit of a break when you're an in-state student. But then look at a private school, they're in-state or not, and then definitely look at another private school that is probably, or state school or both, that is out of state as well. And it doesn't have to be far if you don't want it to be, just to get the comparison.
And Russ, I realized there's one thing, and I can't honestly remember, I don't have the homework in front of me, that might have been included that we didn't address tonight, at least in the slides, is the net price calculator.
So the net price calculator, I actually think what we did was we gave the EFC calculator website, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't know if that's going to come into net price is going to come into account for this one.
You mean for this homework, or?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it does.
Okay. Do you want to just say what it is? And I think it might be on day 4, the data sources that we get.
Yeah, that's what I think we actually are addressing it there. So, and I mean, the net price calculator is basically, that is what you're truly going to end up paying for college when all things are said and done. And that's kind of like, I guess that's like the quickest way that I know to say it is, given your EFC, given all the things we've talked about, the net price calculator is what you are truly going to be spending from an after-tax dollar perspective for a year of college at that institution.
Okay, so let me just tell you, ignore the link that was put in here for homework, because that link's not going to get you the PDF. I will upload it as soon as we finish here. Again, I'll also put it in the group, and it will come in your email, and it should have already come into most people's.
Most people should have it already, right?
Yeah, if you signed up before 7:30 tonight, then you received 1 or 2 emails that had the homework attached to it. But again, we will get it to you as soon as we finish this live.
And you'll see all the PDFs. All the PDFs have a little bit of like a graph box, whatever, for you to do a little bit of work like we're talking about for a couple of schools. And then underneath, there's just a simple, easy checklist of a bunch of questions. And you're just looking to say yes or no. I feel comfortable, I've done this, or I've addressed this, or I am aware of this, or I think I can understand this, or you know what? No, and what you're really looking for, in my opinion, in that aspect are how many no's do you have? And of the no's, like, what do we need to do to make sure those no's move to yes? And that's what kind of this homework is trying to drive you to do and be aware of. So you may have started this process before tonight, with a whole bunch of no's. But hopefully after you do this homework and after we have this, first day of the challenge, you'll actually move a lot of those no's to yeses on the PDF.
Oh, thank you. I don't know, whoever it is, you put the link. That is the link to the PDF. So thank you. I don't have your name, Facebook user, but
But it works. It's good.
I appreciate it. You know what, Ross, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to quickly, and I can bring up a different screen, go to the College Board and actually show people like a specific college and where to find that.
Oh, what I was talking about? Okay.
Yeah. While I'm doing that, I don't know if you want to maybe just high level address, there was a question about, where is that question? Just this is probably somewhat philosophical, but you mentioned ROI, and this person says there's a lot of differences in their house about that. Absolutely.
There are. And look, ROI, if you are in the financial field at all, for a company, is definitely way different from ROI from a college investment perspective, in my opinion. There's a lot of subjectivity when it comes to the college process. So return on investment are a couple things, in my opinion. One is, we'll get to the obvious one last, if that's okay, is the ability for your child to graduate in 4 years. So you might think, and a lot of parents say that to me, they go, he knows or she knows, 4 years after that, it's on them. Well, okay, good luck with that one, because the graduation rates that the Department of Education require colleges to report on are not based on 4 years. They're actually based on 6 years. So think about the expense and the financial thing we just went through tonight. If you added 6 years for each child instead of 4, okay? So return on investment are percent of kids, just as an example, that actually graduate in 4 years. Another return on investment would be helping them find their major so they actually can graduate in 4 years, and actually maybe, it would be kind of nice if they got a job, right? You don't want them on your couch after they spend 4 years, partying and doing whatever, right? So not that that's really bad. They need to do a little bit of that too, but it should be, the ability for students to get a job. And I have to tell you, that is one of the biggest things that I have my students talk about. And we're going to kind of talk about this on the non-academic factors, but internships. When you go to these info sessions and tours, you're going to hear college people get up in front of you and give you these ridiculously high numbers saying 92% of our students had internships. 96% of our kids within 6 months of graduation were either in grad school or had a job. Sounds really impressive. To me, that means nothing. The 96% that in 6 months either had a job or went to grad school, I want to know what percent had a job. I don't really care about the people that went to grad school. To me, they can go to grad school without going to your 4-year institution. And maybe they went to grad school because they couldn't get a job, right? So that, to me, is really important. So that's an ROI factor as well. The other thing is relative to internships too. When they say 92% of kids got internships, well, it sounds great. Did you, college, my child is attending, help them get that internship? Or did they get that on their own and you just took credit for it because they had to fill out paperwork and submit it so that way they got credit? It's a huge, huge difference. So we're going to talk about that a bunch more in the non-academic factors, but those are a couple of things right there. The 4-year graduation rate, ability to help them in their career or major choice at the time to get them out in 4 years, and then also hopefully have them get a job upon graduation.
Okay, so let me share my screen. And
we're going to go an hour a little bit over just because of the logistics. We promise to keep it less in the future, but I think this is important. This is nice of you to do, Deb, because this will be helpful.
Yeah, can you see it?
Oh, yeah.
You can see it says Northeastern?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is from the College Board, guys. This is in their area called Big Future.
Collegeboard.org.
Yes, collegeboard.org, and go to the Big Future section. And I just picked Northeastern. My daughter is there, so I am familiar with it. Okay, so you can see on the left here, it gives you deadlines, the majors are at that school, campus life, applying, and paying. So
Let's click on that. Right, perfect.
if you pick on paying, then there's these tabs up front. Cost of attendance. This is great. Northeastern's it's a private school, so their in-state and out-of-state costs are going to be the same. But as Russ talked about earlier, the cost of attendance, is made up of tuition and fees, which is the bulk, $53,506 here. Room and board, which is also expensive because it's Boston, $16,930. They kind of get into estimates, but this is included in cost of attendance. Books and supplies, just your estimated personal expenses and transportation estimates. So the total cost of attendance is $73,236. Crazy, right? But
Totally.
that's what it is. And then, let's go to financial aid by the numbers. I think that's where this information is. Yes. So they give you an idea called financial aid distribution of how many of their students get some sort of scholarship or grant, and they, how many are taking out loans. But the other important number here is percent of need met. And that's what Russ had talked about earlier.
Right.
Northeastern claims that they will meet 100% of your need.
Now, again, just to be clear on that, Deb, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't expect them to remember it necessarily. Remember, we said you had cost of attendance of 40,000, your EFC was 20, and you had need of 20. So, like I said, schools differ. They can meet 100%, 0% of need. So this school, by that number, is actually great. They meet 100%. So in this case, they would meet 100% of that $20,000 need. But then the next question is, do they meet that with loans? Or do they meet that with gift money or gift aid, which is the free money?
And then let's see, other stats. They applied for need-based aid. So they're telling you what percentage of their students applied for any sort of, need-based financial aid. 48%. So think about that. By default, there's 52% of the students there did not apply for any financial aid.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that also starts to give you a sense of the, honestly, of the economic, makeup of the students at that school.
Correct. Which, by the way, could be obviously people with high incomes who don't think they're going to qualify, people who are not properly educated on the process and what to do, people who are behind the eight ball a little bit, didn't have time to do it, but also, by the way, international students who often also pay for full, they don't qualify for financial aid.
Yes, good point. So this is interesting. This next line says, judged to have need. So just because you applied for need, right, and financial aid, does not mean that they, in this case Northeastern, is going to feel that you have the need. So what they're saying is that 67% of the people who applied for need, they determined that they had some need, but obviously 33% of those people did not have need, even though they applied for it.
And that most likely is going to be based upon that CSS profile submission, by the way, because that's institution specific. That has nothing to do with the federal aid part of it.
And, then this is pretty close. I would think it should be 67%. I don't know why it's off, but so it says 66% of the people were offered aid. So basically it's, they're saying of the people who applied and they determined they had need, they basically gave aid to 66% of those people. I'm sorry, 6% of people, right, who applied. And that was the people who they determined had need.
Yep. Now, I think those numbers over to the right are important too, Debbie, because you can't guarantee that's what your student is going to get. When we were talking about before negotiating, having an understanding of what most kids get, assuming you have need and whatever. And these are the numbers, by the way, as I discussed just before, about treating this as if you're buying a business, a car, or a home. These are the numbers you'd want to have in your back pocket, discuss with financial aid and admissions to see where you are relative to these numbers.
So I hope that gives you a good idea. This was just one example.
Can you do one other thing, Deb? Could you go up to how to apply for financial aid and show them that?
Sure. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so see where right there, that's the CSS profile. Remember before in the call, I told you where they would list the forms for that specific school. That's where you would find it.
Right. So they're saying their financial aid deadline is February 15th, which is past when their application deadline is.
Way past.
Right.
And by the way, just because they have that date, remember we said it comes out October 1st of senior year. You do not want to wait till February 1st to file this form because like I said before, that's when if you do qualify, you're fighting for scraps. You're not getting in when the budget's full.
And you know what I'm surprised that they don't list here is I don't know for sure at Northeastern, but in Northeast, I do know Northeastern has early decision and early action.
Yes.
And sometimes the financial aid, if your child is applying early decision in particular, the financial aid forms are due early then too.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to tell you, so guys, this is one caveat, even though that's what I'm just showing you is from the College Board. The College Board is the, association of all the colleges. And they should have, accurate information.
Well, it's self-reported by the colleges.
Exactly. It's self-reported. And so the ultimate source of information is always the specific college's website or calling the college directly.
Yeah, and I'll even tell you that the websites are usually a little bit more specific, especially if they have a net price calculator or EFC calculator or whatever they call it. But the best way for you to really, again, I just keep going back to the car, the business, the house. You're not going to just put money down on a house without understanding how much you qualify for and what the monthly payments is going to be and what also the utilities and you have to, the financial aspect of your list is important to you. You have to treat it just like those other scenarios. It's not going to hurt your child's ability to get admitted, I promise. That's the guilt that parents put on themselves. Well, I don't want to discuss that because maybe they know, Jane Smith needs money. Don't worry about that. They have money to give. That's not the judgment that they're going to do. Okay, go and vet this out. Start where we're asking you for the homework. But the next steps would be, if you're really interested, especially if you're thinking about early decision, you have to sit down with people and have conversations and understand what you can expect. Very detailed.
Okay. Actually, we're not going to address this question, but I just wanted to show it. We are going to address it this week. We're just not going to address it tonight. Somebody's asking about graduation rates, which is important. And I'm glad you're asking, but we're going to talk about that in the day 4 with data.
Yes, with data. And also, believe it or not, that will be a little bit in our non-academic factor.
I figured too, yes.
Yep.
Okay. What is the average % of tuition and room and board increase each year? Good question to think about.
I don't know what you've seen, Deb. I've seen a 5 to 7% year over year is what I've always heard.
Oh, I haven't. I've 3 to 5 or 6.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Probably to be on the safe side, you could and should budget 5%.
I would think so, yes.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of crazy, but.
Right. Do you recommend applying for financial aid at the same time your child applies for college?
I think, again, it depends. And again, we're not even talking about that. That's a whole nother part of the process. Early action, early decision, rolling, determining what's a reach, match, safety, all those kind of things. I mean, in general, I would say financial aid, again, if it opens up October 1st, I always advise my clients to get it in no later than Thanksgiving, but actually hopefully by November 1st is what I usually give as a goal, which is most of the early action, early decision kind of dates around that time. So I don't think it needs to correlate. And you also, by the way, do not need to wait for your child to apply, then file financial aid. It doesn't have, they keep track of all that stuff. It's not going to matter. So one's not contingent upon the other. I just think for financial aid purposes, regardless of when your child, even if they apply regular and it's not due until the application's not due till January 1st, I still think you want to get into that October, early November timeframe. You want to get your forms in.
So this is a good question, a little bit even more detailed than what you were just answering. Do we have to wait until they hear from the school whether or not they're accepted to apply for financial aid?
No, definitely not. You actually want to do it because that's a decision criterion for you. So whether they're accepted or not, you definitely want to understand what your financial aid. And by the way, if your child for some reason is not accepted, they're not even going to bother giving you what your financial aid package would be anyway.
Okay. hopefully this was a good start. This is day one, and we got 4 more days of good content, good questions, homework. So
I think that if everybody does the work on the PDF, which again, like Debbie said, should take you no more than 15, 20 minutes tops, I think it'll be a good indoctrination to the things that we're trying to teach you and that we covered here today. Remember, you can have access to the recording if you want to go back and listen, get any of the explanations again and any of that kind of stuff. Because the one thing I will say, to try to keep these meetings going forward in that like 45-minute time frame, we're not going to be able to kind of completely go back and discuss things that we've already discussed. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. But I think that the PDF will lead you to get some real definitive data that you can use for the first step of building that perfect college list. And then tomorrow, we're going to talk about academic factors, which sounds obvious, but it might be a little bit more than what you're thinking.
And one last piece of housekeeping, which I realized this is, again, just to keep you guys like notified, is you can we set up events for every night of the Facebook Live. The events are in the Facebook group. If you go to the events and you just say, I'm coming, then Facebook will notify you like 45 minutes before the Facebook Live starts. We'll also send emails, but I'm just trying to show you all the different ways that you can get notifications so you don't miss our upcoming Facebook Lives. But they'll also be pretty easy because they're going to be at 8:30 every night.
8:30 Eastern.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow night.
Work on the homework.